بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين وانفعنا بالقرآن والذكر الحكيم اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا بما ينفعنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا اللهم عذنا من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا وأصلح لنا شأننا كله لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. Inshallah, today we're going to look at Surah al-Hujurat, which we mentioned in the past. Okay, so this was in relation to the disease of the tongue. When we were talking about the eye, remember we looked at some of the verses of Surah Nur, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the believers to lower the gaze, and to the believing women to lower the gaze. That was to do with the eye. So to do with the tongue, we want to look at Surah al-Hujurat. And of course, the Quran is the source of knowledge, you know. In Islam, it goes without saying, you know. But especially in the time we found ourselves in now, in these latter centuries, where the world has gone through such transformations, so that human beings now live in a way that they never lived before. The Quran is even more highlighted to us as Muslims how essential and important was, because it's the thing that we have 100% certainty in, that revelation. With the hadith, even none of our scholars ever said there's 100% certainty in the hadith, even if they're sahih, unless they're at the mutawatir level, which means they were narrated from so many different sahaba, the same hadith, that then leads us to having 100% certainty. But most hadith, vast majority, are not of that nature. Yeah, they're narrated by one sahabi or two or three. That still doesn't reach the level of mutawatir. Now scholars obviously debated how many do you need to make it mutawatir, and most agreed averagely around the number of 10. Yeah, so around about 10 sahaba, that's like the agreed upon, or the majority opinion. But really the fact is there's no precise definition of tawatur. Tawatur simply means any report that comes through so many different sources, and those different sources could not have been collaborating together to mislead you, that it can give you certainty. So that's why the Quran is just for us, especially in the age we are in now, is just such a huge blessing and such a great guidance. Although of course it has been at all times, but it sort of highlights that there's, in this world we live of what they call now post-modern, the idea being there's that we've come to a post-rational stage as well, where basically there's no truth, there's no absolute truths out there. Everyone just has to make their own way, etc. We have this unique book, the Muslims, that we can say every word in this book is absolute truth, which is an amazing thing. Anyway, so going to the Quran for this, Surah al-Hujurat is a very amazing surah. And it's important to look at the Quran in surahs as well, in surah form, because this is actually the division that that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down in surahs. Because what happened amongst many Muslims, we often start reading like juz, or what we call sipara or hizb, and that's an artificial division actually that was done later on, not by the Prophet ﷺ. It was done later on to help people who just wanted to, for example, finish the Quran every 30 days or every 60 days, so they know what portion to read every day. But that's not how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed it to us, because it says in the Quran, "In kuntum fi raybin mimma nazalna ala abdina fa'tu bi suratin." So the word surah is mentioned several times in the Quran itself. So Allah says, bring a surah. If you have any doubt concerning the Quran, bring a surah. You know. So there is a divine revelation in the form of surah. So I like to read the Quran in the form of surahs wherever possible. This may not be possible, obviously, if you're reading a certain amount every day. Some surahs are going to be too long, some will be short, but it's nice to actually, if you start the surah, if you can, to finish it as well. So you read it as a total, as a surah itself, and you'll see some of the hikmahs and the wisdoms and the secrets that will come from reading the surah as a whole. Because there is a structure there is a theme, there are a lot of secrets there. Surah Al-Hujurat, if we look at Surah Al-Hujurat as a whole, one of the things that's running through this surah is it's a surah of how to go from the stage of Islam to Iman. From Islam to Iman, to go up to the next stage. Because we know there's different stages of Islam, Iman and Ihsan, the three stages that were mentioned. And this is very clearly, if you look at towards the end of the surah, and this is why you have to read the surahs as a whole, because sometimes there will be things in different parts of the surah that will connect together. If you look towards the end of the surah, you'll see an indication of what I'm talking about here. If you look at this verse number 14, قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لا تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا. So this is a clear indication that there's a difference between Islam and Iman in the Quran. ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم. These Arab, these Bedouins, they came to the Prophet and they said, we believe, we're embracing, they were saying we're embracing Islam. So they said to him, they wanted to embrace Islam, they said, Amanna, we believe. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually then sent down this ayah. قالت الأعراب آمنا قل, Prophet say to them, لم تؤمنوا, you don't believe. And this was obviously, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is revealing something about their inner state, about these people that claim to have become into the fold of Islam. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew they haven't actually truly believed in this religion. They're doing it for pragmatic purposes. They're doing it because now Islam is becoming widespread around Medina and outside of Medina, and they wanted to join, to just go on board that ship, on board that thing. But they hadn't actually truly believed inside. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to them, لا تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا. You should simply say, we have submitted. Aslamna, we have submitted, we have become Muslim. Because in other words, they're submitting their outward to the deen of Islam, to the Sharia. But Iman has not entered into their hearts. وَلَمْ يَدْخُلْ إِيمَانٌ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. Iman has not entered their hearts. And this is acceptable actually, this is acceptable. If people become Muslim, later on they might become mu'min. So actually it's a mistake, sometimes when someone says to you, I want to become Muslim, and you say to him, look, are you sure? Do you really believe? Are you sure? Think about it carefully. We shouldn't actually say that. We should actually encourage them to take the Shahada straight away as soon as possible. Because that's the nature of Iman actually, it grows. Often after people become Muslim, sometimes many years after their Iman starts growing more and more. So, becoming Muslim is a great blessing for them. So we should never discourage people. In fact, some of the ulama, they used to say, if you're inside your house and someone is passing by outside on the street and he says to you from the window, I've decided I want to become Muslim, they said you should take Shahada for him straight away there. Don't wait for him to come to the front door. Take the Shahada there from the window. Because you don't know, he could drop down dead the next minute before he gets to the front door. It's too big, the thing is too big. You're saving these people from eternal hellfire. So take the shahada straight away. Yeah, and inshallah ta'ala, by the nature of Islam, the beauty of Islam, when someone becomes Muslim, very rarely they will then go out, they will only increase and increase in Iman. So this indication, this ayah indicates one of the things in this surah is actually teaching us how to go from the state of Islam into the higher state of Iman. Yeah, and like Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi in his tafsir, he says about this surah, in this surah we have how to be believers. It's teaching us how to be true mu'min, not just Muslim but a mu'min. And how does it do that? It teaches us how our relationship should be towards the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How our relationship should be towards other Muslims, and how our relationship should be towards the fasiq or the kafir. Yeah? So, having a look at this surah, the indication here is that the restraining and the guarding of the tongue is the vital thing to take you up to the next level. From Muslim to Mu'min, the restraining of the tongue is the vital thing. And we've mentioned some of the hadith before in previous classes about the importance of guarding the tongue, so I won't repeat them again now. But suffice just to mention the one in which the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the head of this matter is Islam, the pillar of it is Salah, and the highest peak of it is Jihad, struggling in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the controller of all of those things is the tongue, is restraining the tongue. So how does the surah start then, going back? يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تُقَدِّمُوا بَيْنَ يَدَيِ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Oh, you who believe, be careful. I'm just giving the meaning now. Oh, you got the translation there. Put not yourselves forward before Allah and His Messenger. Here, putting forward, according to the tafsir, it means being inappropriate in front of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As the following ayahs will explain. Yeah? Don't be forward. Don't lose the limits of your adab in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wattaqullah, once again the taqwa which comes in throughout the Quran. Inna Allaha sami'un alim. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu la tarfa'u aswatakum fawqa sawti an-nabi. So the first then is what's our relationship to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the vital thing that's going to take us from Muslim to Mu'min. These things, you know. وَلَا تَجْهَرُوا لَهُ بِالْقَوْلِ كَجَهْرِ بَعْضِكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ أَنْ تَحْبَطَ أَعْمَالُكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. It's a very strong ayah regarding the adab of how we are with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. O you who believe, do not raise your voices above his voice. So not even that you don't raise your voice, which would be like shouting. It means don't raise your voice above his voice. He wasn't someone who was speaking loudly or shouting. He was someone who speaks normal. Yeah? But make sure you don't speak louder than him. Keep your voice lower than his. Look at the very subtle level of adab there. You know? And some of the scholars later on, they actually applied this to when you hear the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that we should remain silent as well. Because obviously, as it says in the Quran, you know, when you hear the Quran, إِذَا قُرِئَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقُرْآنُ فَأَنصِتُوا فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا. Listen and keep silent when you hear the Quran. Some of the scholars also applied this onto hadith based on this ayah, that these are the words of the Prophet ﷺ that you're hearing, so don't raise your voices when they're being spoken. وَلَا تَجْهَرُوا لَهُ بِالْقَوْلِ كَجَهْرِ بَعْضِكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ. Don't sort of raise your voice like you do to one another with him. Often when we speak to our Muslim brothers or sisters, we may start raising our voices at each other or getting heated up and things like that. Don't treat the Prophet ﷺ like you treat one another in this respect. You know? Don't forget the adab, don't forget who he is. You know? There's the nature of things. For us, we might think, you know, if we were with the Prophet ﷺ, we wouldn't even dream of doing something like that. But then it's different when you're living with someone. Like the Sahaba, they were with him, day in, day out, and they knew him as a human being, you know. So sometimes when you're with someone, as the ulama say, you can get more involved with their human aspects of that person, rather than thinking of his aspect of being a prophet and a messenger. You see what I mean? So sometimes that danger then that you forget the adab you have with that person. But then this is the scary part of it. أن تحبط أعمالكم وأنتم لا تشعرون. What's the consequence if you did lose this adab in front of the Prophet ﷺ? It could be that all of your actions will be lost. All of your actions will be lost without you perceiving, without you realizing. Without you realizing. So now, what this is telling us is the importance of the adab to the Prophet ﷺ. Why we got to just get this into our heads? Because this is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the guidance He sent us. We can't dictate what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dictates to us what is pleasing to Him. It's from the ego of the human being who thinks he knows best. Yeah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهِ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهِ. If you love Allah or you claim to love Allah, then follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then Allah will love you. Then Allah will love you. This was directed towards the Christians who came to the Muslims and saying, no, we're the beloveds of Allah and all of this. So this is a big problem within the Ummah that there's arisen a movement which is very bad in its respect and denigrating towards the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah? Not just the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but also they often talk about all the other prophets as well, saying for example they committed sins, etc. I don't want to go into the debate about whether the prophets commit sins or they don't commit sins. Suffice to say, the majority opinion of Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah historically has always been that the prophets did not commit any sins. Yeah? There was some difference of opinion about minor sins, but even there the majority opinion is they don't commit minor or major sins. But definitely not major sins like lying, backbiting, or cheating, all these things, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects them, because that's why we know they're truthful when they come to us. Otherwise, if there were people who lie, cheat and swindle like the rest of us, when they come then with the message, it wouldn't be convincing to people. But that's on one side. There's room for ikhtilaf, there's room for difference of opinion if it's done with the correct adab and respect. But what there is not room for is not having respect towards the Prophet and not speaking towards him in a state of veneration. Now this disease ultimately it goes back to Iblis, because this is the first problem that happened in creation. Iblis was unable to bow down to a creature. And this is the same disease, you see, because a human being wants to arrogate themselves, like Iblis was arrogating himself. He wanted to bow to Allah, but he didn't want to bow to a human being. You know what I mean? So bowing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not difficult, actually. If you know who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, it's not difficult to bow to Allah. Yeah? What's the test? When it becomes a test is when Allah tells you to bow to another human being or a creature. That's when it's a test. You know what I mean? Otherwise there's no test. For Iblis there's no test until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam and said to all the malaika, isjudu, bow to him. That then is a test. Because why? This is a real test if you're obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can put down your ego and obey the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Iblis refused. So this same disease then we see in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ in a hadith that's recorded in the Sahih, including al-Bukhari, where a man, when the Prophet ﷺ was dividing up some zakat, some ghanima that they had got. Actually, I can't remember if it was zakat or ghanima. Ghanima, I think yes, ghanima. Ghanima is booty from a battle. He was dividing that up, and then a Bedouin, an Arab came to him, a Bedouin Muslim who had embraced Islam, but not one of the people of Medina, of the Ansar or the Muhajirin, one of the tribes. He came up to the Prophet ﷺ and very rudely and abruptly spoke to him, saying, Ya Muhammad, without using the term of respect firstly, because Sahaba never referred to the Prophet ﷺ by his name like that, and in fact, amongst the Arabs they tend to use kunya, which is considered more polite. You don't really use someone's first name. But then especially for someone who is like the Messenger of Allah, you don't, you call him Ya Rasulullah or so on. In fact, the Sahaba, they normally would, before that, they would also put a term like Fidaka Abi wa Ummi, may my father and mother be ransomed for you, O Messenger of Allah, when they spoke to him. May my father and mother be ransomed for you. May they be taken prisoner for you, for you to be free. See the ultimate respect there from the Sahaba. So this man came to say, Ya Muhammad, ittaqillah. Fear Allah. So the Sahaba were surprised, the Sahaba were with him. And he said to him, fear Allah in the way that you're dividing up the booty. So at this point then Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu was there, start reaching for his sword and drawing his sword, because he was going to kill him, because he saw this as a capital offense, that someone's come and been accusing the Prophet of not being just, you know what I mean? In other words, of doing a major sin. That's what he's doing, he's accusing him of doing a major sin. First of all, he's disrespectful in the way he addressed him, and secondly, he's then accusing him of being unjust, which is a major sin in how you divide the booty. So Sayyidina Umar was going to take off his head. The Prophet stopped him. And the Prophet was quite angry with the man. He said to him, oh so and so, if I'm not going to do this justly, then who will be just? But then he let the man go. This is the type of disease that the human being, if the ego is allowed to, that they don't want to submit to any other, that any other man is better than them. Even if it's the Messenger of Allah. So this now became widespread amongst the Ummah in latter days, with certain teachings that started going about, where these people started accusing the Muslims of venerating the Prophet to too much of an extent, but then by consequence they started then denigrating and going to a state of disrespect, which was unacceptable. Some of their criticism may even have been valid. Some of their criticism may have been valid, but probably what they're doing is even worse. Because as soon as you start being disrespectful to the Prophet ﷺ, these ayahs start applying to you. All your good actions you're doing, your prayer, your fasting, all these things, because he's the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. And if you love someone, then you don't want other people to disrespect them. It's like, think of someone that you love very much, say like your parents, your mom, your dad, so on, your children. If someone, he claims to be your friend, but at the same time he's abusing them or insulting them or denigrating them, are you going to accept that friendship from that person? All the time, that's his. He's very friendly with you. He doesn't have a problem with you. But all the time, whenever you see him, he's always just putting down those people that are most beloved to you. And he's not going to say long to your friend. And this is exactly the same. That those people who want to be friends with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or claim that they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they spend all their time insulting the ones that He loves, the prophets, denigrating them. Then they're cut off. So this is what we mean by saying we don't dictate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what is pleasing to Him. He dictates to us what is pleasing to us. And then, so that was one man who was disrespectful to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But maybe he was praying, fasting every day. We don't know. But then look at the other man who loved the Prophet ﷺ and was respectful to him, but was committing major sins. What was the outcome of him? Also in Sahih al-Bukhari. They said there used to be this man who was known as a type of comedian amongst them, like amongst the Sahaba. He was not taken as, he was always messing around. And he would be inclined towards drinking alcohol even after it was made prohibited. And it says in the hadith, one day he came to the Prophet ﷺ when he was in a state of intoxication. So the Prophet ﷺ had him punished, beaten, which is a beating, the punishment for drinking alcohol. And then when this man was leaving, one of the Sahaba, they cursed him. They said, may Allah's curse be upon him. What are you doing? You're drinking alcohol. And the Prophet ﷺ then forbade them. He said, no, don't say that to this man. Don't curse him, for surely he loves Allah and His Messenger. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So that's the case of the person, even though he's doing major sin, but he's got that love for Allah and His Messenger. So he was not cut away. He wasn't banished from the Prophet ﷺ, didn't banish him or say, curse him or send him away. No, he loved Allah and His Messenger. So this is very important, first of all, because we will never get to a state of Iman without having the requisite respect for the Prophet ﷺ. This was very well understood amongst our ulama. If you look, no matter from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, it's always about the love of the Prophet ﷺ. As you know in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said to Sayyidina Umar, none of you will truly have Iman until he loves me more than everyone, even his own self. La yu'minu ahadukum. None of you will truly believe. So once again, that's called for Iman. So Iman will not come until we truly love the Prophet. And if you love someone, you're not going to criticize them or be disrespectful to them. If you love them like that. So that's the first step towards trying to get Iman. And that's the most important step. Because as we see, if you have that love and that respect for the Prophet ﷺ, even if you fall into mistakes or things, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness will be close. These are the important things. It's not important how many prayers we do, how many nafals we do, how many Qurans we read every Ramadan, how many things we don't have this love for the Prophet and respect for him. This is what the Quran is teaching us. إن الذين يغضون أصواتهم عند رسول الله أولئك الذين امتحن الله قلوبهم للتقوى. Those people who lower their voices in front of the Prophet ﷺ, these are the ones that Allah has put taqwa in their hearts. So once again, very clearly, those are the ones, once again, they're having respect for the Prophet ﷺ. Taqwa is in their hearts. So this is from Quran, it's not coming from other places. لَهُمْ مَغْفِرَةٌ وَأَجْرٌ عَظِيمٌ. And as you know, Sayyidina Umar after this ayah was revealed, he didn't come to the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ for several days, where he used to come regularly. Why? Because he became afraid that this was revealed concerning him, of raising the voice. Because he was someone who had a loud voice naturally. So he became fearful that maybe this is relating to me, until eventually the Prophet ﷺ had to send messengers to him, ask him, why are you not coming to the masjid? Tell him to come to the masjid. So then he started coming back to the masjid, and then they said he used to speak so quietly because we had to strain our ears to hear him in the masjid of the Prophet. That's someone who understands what the Quran is. Yeah, that's someone when the Quran is revealed, he understands where it's coming from. So then it talks a bit further about this. Those people, they were shouting at the Prophet ﷺ from behind the curtain, etc. Yeah? Now going down, then remember Imam al-Razi said, it teaches also how to deal with the fasiq and the disbelievers. If you're a mu'min, this is how you're going to deal with the fasiq. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in ja'akum fasiqun bin naba fatabayyanu. If a fasiq, an unrighteous person, could be a believer or a disbeliever. A disbeliever by definition will be fasiq, because they're doing the worst crime, which is denying what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. Yeah? If a fasiq brings you news, naba, from the same root as nabi. Nabi is the one who gives us news of the akhirah, news of things that will come. The prophet, in that, the original, the meaning of the word prophet is to tell of things that will come afterwards. So naba is news. If a fasiq brings you news, don't accept it until you verify it for yourself. So this is a very important ayah for the age we live in, of the news media. Yeah? Don't forget, this is Quran, this is words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This Quran gives us guidance to the Day of Judgment. Whenever you turn on the news media, they're all fasiq. They're all fasiq that are giving you that news. Huh? You can see that because they're in a state of disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of the women, for example, that are doing that. If you find a good, reliable news station, that's different. But mainly it's fasiq, these big international news channels. And by the way, all these channels like Al Jazeera, Geo, I mean, first of all, you can see they're fasiq anyway. But even if you couldn't see that, what we have to also know is where they're getting the news from. You know? So there are certain sources. There are what they call, Reuters, and these people are the actual agencies. There are only very few agencies that provide the news to all these news channels. So the sources are very, very few behind all of these different channels. That's why you see a very striking similarity across the news, what is reported. Because actually it's unaffordable. If you set up a news channel and you want to give news from around the world, you can't afford to have people in every country around the world and pay them salaries to bring you news. And in fact, most news channels lose money. So you've got to ask yourself, why then are they in business? Why are they being set up? Because they are there for a very specific purpose. For those people who are in power, they need these channels. They are a very, very powerful form of propaganda, mind control, giving us ideas, showing us things. Money are being put into them to keep them up. We want to get to the crux of what we're talking about today, is the tongue aspect. So this is another indication here about the theme of the surah about Iman. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ لَوْ يُطِيعُكُمْ فِي كَثِيرٍ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ لَعَنِتُّمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانَ. Know that between you is the messenger of Allah. If he was to follow you in many things, you would fall into misfortune. This throws the idea of democracy out the window. Also, other ayahs of the Quran, أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. The Quran says several statements of that meaning that most of people don't know. Most of people, majority of people, أكثر الناس. But what does the Quran say about the way Muslims deal with things? وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. The affair of the Muslims is based on consultation, mutual consultation. Look at the Khulafa al-Rashidun, that's how they were running the affairs. Okay? You have a Khalifa and then you have a Shura. You have Majlis Shura, a consultation. If he's a righteous person, now the thing with the Prophet ﷺ, whenever he took Shura, they say in the Seerah, whenever he took Shura, he always went with the Shura. In a way, he went with the majority. Or he went, if the Shura was overwhelmingly on one side, even if his personal opinion was against that, he would go with the Shura. Yeah? So it says in the Quran, أَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. Well, you could say it's a type of, but not democracy as we know it. It depends what you mean by democracy, but not in the way that Western countries are running things. Shura is who's in the Shura first of all. You know? They're people of knowledge, understanding, wisdom, piety. It's not everyone. You see what I mean? So anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked, but we could do a whole talk about all of that. But suffice it to say, here it says clearly, if the Prophet ﷺ was to follow what all the Sahaba were saying all the time, we would fall into all these troubles. But this point, وَلَكِنَ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمْ إِيمَانَ وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Allah has made Iman beloved to you and embellished it in your heart. This is another sign of a mu'min. When someone has moved from Islam to Iman, or is in the process of increasing his Iman, Iman becomes beloved to him. وَكَرَّهَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْكُفْرَ وَالْفُسُوقَ وَالْعِصْيَانَ. And kufr, falling back into kufr, or fisq, or disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, starts becoming detestable to him. This is a sure sign that someone's Iman is becoming stronger. If you think back, or when people start practicing or start become Muslim, they still may have a love for some of those things that they were doing that was disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But slowly, as you become stronger and stronger in your Iman and in your Deen, those things actually start becoming detestable to you. And there's a hadith about this as well. The Prophet ﷺ said, none of you will truly believe until his desires follow that which I have brought. So you actually start loving those things which are obedience to Allah, and you start hating those things which are disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the actual thought of drinking alcohol or zina or these type of things which are disobedience actually becomes detestable to you, and you love those things which are like doing zikr or reading Quran and these things. So this is a sign of someone moving into those higher levels of Iman. Okay, we'll skip some of these, but very important ayahs here about teaching the adab is when two groups of believers start fighting. What's the adab of how to deal with that? And from the lives of Sahaba, we also see instances of how that is managed. Because when two believing parties fight, it's different to when believers are fighting non-believers. It's a whole different dynamic, there's a whole different ahkam of sharia that apply. And these are the sort of core surahs that deal with this, but we won't talk about them today. Now this is important. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. All believers are brothers. This will relate later on to the backbiting issue about eating the flesh of your dead brother. Yeah? But this is once again talking about when the two believing. So even though they're fighting, they're brothers. I remember saying that Ali was saying about the Khawarij. From إِخْوَانُنَا بَغَوْا عَلَيْنَا. See how he understood from this. See how he's. They were living the Quran, these Sahaba. Said, yeah, these Khawarij, they are our brothers. So now this is the text that we're going to focus on. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكن خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابذوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم. Okay, and then actually quite an important ayah that relates back, that finishes off that. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. So don't put other people down, don't backbite, don't make fun of people. The one who has the most taqwa is the one who is most noble in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you don't know the one who has most taqwa, so you shouldn't be putting people down. So that's how it relates to the two ayahs before. So these two ayahs here now mention 5 things that are forbidden, 5 things that we shouldn't be doing. Yeah. First of all, لا يسخر قوم من قوم. Sukhriya, to mock, put people down, mock someone by putting them down. Yeah. That person doesn't know anything, that person's worthless, that person doesn't have any, he's a nobody, he's a nothing. That type of thing, yeah. So Sukhriya is to mocking, but put people down by mocking them as well. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Don't put people down. Don't mock them because maybe they're better than you. See how it relates to the verses being offered. We don't know who's got taqwa. We don't know who are the people of taqwa. There are certain signs that you can see when someone has taqwa and some people don't. But those signs can be misleading because some people can actually affect. Yeah? You see people, big beards, big miswaks, rolled up trousers, everything, big turbans. Like Imam al-Ghazali, you say the bigger the beard, the less taqwa. You can't tell. But people could be acting in a certain way because they're taking the outward. And they could even be outwardly acting humble, but inwardly they're full of arrogance. We don't know. We really don't know. There's no people, no one knows. This is something that I heard recently from Abdul Hakim Murad as well. Said, we don't know who is a wali. Remember we talked in the tafsir class, big difference of opinion. Does the wali himself know he's a wali or not? And Imam al-Razi's opinion was he doesn't. But then other people don't know either. So we don't know who's better and who's worse. So that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Don't put people down. Don't make fun of them. Don't look down on them. Maybe they're better than us. And then wala nisa min nisa. Imam al-Razi says this is because qawm applies to men specifically. The word qawm applies to men specifically. So that's why then women are mentioned separately as well. Yeah? Let not women mock or detract from other women. Maybe they're better than them. Who's better? It says in the ayah following, Inna atqakum. The people with the most taqwa, they're the best people. They're the akramakum. They're the most noble and the highest in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَلَا تَنَابَزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ. Imam al-Razi mentions here an interesting point. He says, these 3 things mentioned here, Sukhriya, Al-Lamaz and Nabaz, they go in order of, like, the first one is the most serious, or the worst thing, it's actually mock and put people down. Put them down and say, you're rubbish, you don't know anything, these type of things. Then the second, which is a slightly less than that, is called Lamaz. He says here, do not defame He seems to have missed it out actually. He's translated as defame or sarcastic here. Lamas actually is La talmizu anfusakum. Actually, I think that's slightly misleading. It's actually to point out the faults of the person, point out faults of someone. Yeah, lamas. It's actually point out faults of someone. Yeah? And then nabas, the final one is to call people by names, nicknames, offensive nicknames, or not even offensive, but nicknames that are denigrating, that are not really praising, elevating the person, but are rather negative. So that's a slightly lower. So criticizing, pointing out their faults is lamas. They may have those faults. You know what I mean? But then nabas, when you're putting them nicknames, normally they don't have the thing. It's just like a name calling. They're not actually the thing itself. Like if you call someone a donkey, is one of the examples they give. Yeah? They don't have that. They're not a donkey, but it's just a name. So that's why they sort of go down in seriousness. Yeah? Now, so the three things here, just to recap, sukhriya is Imam al-Ghazali said it's like disregarding people. So you might not even pay them any attention. Just think they're just nobodies. You don't give any worth to them, even though he's a mu'min. Yeah? Then, and that's why he said lamas is a bit actually less, because in lamas you actually point out their faults. In the sukhriya, you might not even descend yourself to even comment on them. You think they're so low. You see what I mean? You might not even say anything, but you just think they're so low. They're not even worthy of being spoken about. So lamas is actually, you're giving them some importance, but you're actually pointing out their faults. So you criticize them. Oh, that person, this person. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't criticize, point out faults of yourselves, meaning the believers, your one body. I wonder how Pakistan has translated that as well. Ayah number 11. Pixel is slightly more accurate than Yusuf Ali. So first one he said sukhriya, deride, and then for lamas he put defame. Yeah, defame, point out the faults of someone, defame them. Yeah. And then insult one another by nicknames. So what does it mean insulting nicknames, the last one? Yeah? Tanabazu. Like I mentioned, this is where you give people certain nicknames which are denigrating. Yeah? So calling someone a donkey is a nickname, or whatever type of nickname it is, yeah? Big ears. So it's not. I mean, some have said these are minor things as well. Some of these could be minor, not considered kaba'ir. But here you see, this is the point. This surah is taking us from Islam to Iman. And for those people who want to get to the higher stage, to make their Iman strong, these are the finer etiquettes of adab between your Muslim brothers. Yeah, so what's the basis of all this? Is because we should see the mu'min as something high, something elevated. The fact that he is a mu'min, or the fact that he is a Muslim, that's enough to elevate him in our eyes. Yeah? And then on top of that, knowing that he may be someone inside who is close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't know. Yeah? That should elevate him in our eyes. The Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he said, don't look down on any Muslim. You should always think that any Muslim is better than you. Because they've got that thing, Iman. No? But also all of these things, sukhriya, criticizing people, finding their faults, pointing out their faults, or even, which is probably the lesser thing, is just giving them nicknames, offensive nicknames. All of these things are in some way putting that person down, lessening the worth of that person. And Imam al-Razi says it means you got a Muslim, but you're not giving him ta'zeem. We should actually, for any mu'min, any Muslim, we should be giving them ta'zeem. We should actually be elevating them, giving them respect. This is to do with respect. And actually, then Imam al-Razi made a good point. He said, these may be minor sins, but this applies to those who persist upon them. If someone becomes habituated to doing these things, any minor sin which is done constantly or repetitively becomes a major sin. So you'll often find people, even though they think this is not very major, but they start doing this often. It becomes a way their personality. They're always putting people down, or they're always making fun of people. Because making fun of people ultimately is about boosting your own ego as well. If we look deeply down inside, when you make fun of someone or put them down, it means because you're thinking yourself something big. So this is the core of it. Even though they're minor sins, when it becomes someone's personality, someone becomes habituated to that, then it will turn into a major sin. It will turn into a major sin. So that's a danger. If on one occasion you made a funny name of someone, and then you make tawbah to Allah, Allah forgives you, okay, so it's a minor sin, inshallah, it's forgiven. But then, the danger is when people become accustomed to these things. It can become their norm. But you often find these characters, they're always joking around, making fun of people. That's a dangerous, and you're going into a danger zone. And so that's why Imam al-Razi linked it to the actual end of the ayah, which says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَتُبْ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Those who don't do tawbah, in other words, this becomes the norm of the way they live, the way they interact with people. They carry on doing these things, criticizing, putting people down, making fun of people. They don't do tawbah. They make that, then it can become a, that's a serious thing. That's not a small thing. They're the zalimun. That's serious. So don't put these things, don't minimize these things, especially for those of us who want to strive to get to the next level and increase our iman. These are those things that stop us. These are the barriers. We may start doing lots of dhikr and Quran and dua, but our tongue is busy harming other people. These are the things that will be stopping us from making progress. That's why this is so important. It's focusing us down on these things of how to raise us to the level of iman. And then two things mentioned here, or you could say three even. The first two are linked, to do with dhann, having suspicion, and spying on people. Having suspicion and spying on people. And then the third one is the backbiting. So that's the fifth one. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم. O you who believe, avoid having a lot of suspicion. Avoid being suspicious. Avoid being suspicious people. Always suspicious about other people. So what's this person saying? What's this person thinking about me? What's this person doing behind my back? Don't be suspicious people. In other words, have good opinion of your Muslim brothers and sisters. Oh, and by the way, we've often talked about that issue about backbiting, whether it applies to non-Muslims. Finally, we come across a statement of Imam al-Ghazali when reading this tafsir. He mentioned here that this clearly indicates this applies to Muslims. So that's not to say that it's okay to backbite not Muslims, um, but this ayah is talking about Muslims. It applies to Muslims. That's a major sin. Talking about non-Muslims may come under other general rules about having, being good to your neighbors, etc. Yeah? So, but this specifically said it applies just to the mu'min in this, the Muslim in this ayah. So it clearly says, "Akhihi Maita," his brother. So, in the ba'd al-dhan ithm, some of some of the suspicions you have acting on them may lead you to sin. Why? Because it could lead us to coming to certain conclusions. So in other words, you're suspicious. Oh, I think that person's talking about me to that person, or why did that person do so and so thing? It must be because he feels like this towards me, or he's trying to do this to me. So I'll do something back. Then you fall into sin by trying to get that person back. Imam al-Razi mentions on this point that it is very important to have a good opinion of Muslims, because often many of these things are people taking it the wrong way as well. Someone might do something and you assume they've done for a certain reason to get to you or something, but maybe they haven't. Maybe they're totally innocent of that intention. Maybe they've done it forgetfully. Maybe they had been, made a mistake, or they done something. There was some reason which you haven't, because you haven't asked them. You've jumped to conclusions. So, abiding by these ayahs can lead to much more social harmony between Muslims as well. Because often problems arise through this. Up to 70 excuses. Make 70 excuses. Have good opinion of your Muslim brothers. That's what the hadith mentions. So in other words, if a Muslim does something and you think you think they're going to do something to you or harm you in some way, just try to think of a good explanation. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا. Do not spy on one another. Sometimes suspicion can lead to spying as well. I'm sure these things, they're trying to do this to you. I'm gonna, sneak and have a listen to what they're saying, or I'm gonna be, watching them. Tajassusu. So spying is a major problem. Yes. Yeah. That's a good one. I was just thinking of that myself as well. I think with children, obviously, it's different because you have a responsibility towards children for their welfare. So as long as you just do the minimum to try to teach them how to be safe, you can just, but yeah, I mean, I have the parental control software on my home computer, and it gives you an option of seeing the websites that they've been visiting. But I don't like to do that. I feel a bit uncomfortable. I do feel spying, even though it's my own children. And that software blocks inappropriate content, so you probably don't need to really. Why do you want to go through the thing? But no, I mean, this is obviously spying is considered a major sin. And we're in the age of tajassus. This is the age of tajassus. Yes. Of what now you're talking about? The kids. Mm. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, can't just let children go on the internet nowadays and just have no type of control, definitely. Um, but I mean, like I mentioned, if you have certain type of software, sometimes that will do half the job for you. It will hopefully prevent inappropriate content. But I definitely get the point, and that's why I said, with children we have responsibilities, and it is like, you need to make sure they're safe. Passwords, I think that's good. Yeah. That's fine. For the children, I mean, they don't need to have secrets. Mm, 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 mm. Um, it's a value. Um, yeah, I think you do it under Amr bil Maruf then. They're hiding it. It depends. How would you come across it though? How would you know that? I think we deal with like any adult Muslim. Like if you found they were doing a major sin inadvertently, um, you'd have to use your hikmah, isn't it? Because there is an aspect of Amr bil Maruf as well. But you want them to be guided as well. But at the same time, like you said, there is an aspect of exposing people as well. But you have to use judgment, I guess. It could be. I think you'd have to use judgment. And then which one outweighs which. Yeah. But if you feel that your reminder could help them to stop that thing, that's what I mean. Mm, yeah. Yeah. Because there's that story of Sayyidina Umar as well, isn't it, in Medina? One day when he was wandering around at night, he used to check around, and then he heard some people, and then he looked in the house. They were drinking wine, and they had music and singing bells in Medina. So he went. He was with Abdullah bin Mas'ud, Sayyidina Umar. So he went burst into the house and said, what are you doing? He was a Khalifa at the time. Um, and the man said to him, yeah, Amir al-Mu'mineen, what are you doing? First of all, you're spying on me, and second, you burst into my house without asking permission. So then Sayyidina Umar said, he left, he realized actually, and then he left it. And then, uh, sometime later, the man, I think, either came to him or he met the man, and Sayyidina Umar, he whispered, he said to the man, come and he whispered to him, he said, since that time, I don't do that anymore. And the man said to him, come and he whispered to him, he said, since that time I haven't done that either anymore. So, but I think, to do with your question, Faris, is It's for the ulama to make a judgment of, because circumstances change. You know, for any country or any place, any Islamic place, they have to decide what's the social conditions, you know, and what would be appropriate. You know? So, yeah, of course, to override something which is a major sin, you have to have a very good reason in Sharia. But it doesn't mean that that can never be done. You see what I mean? So if the Khalifa or the ulama of that place, whoever, you know, if they were proper Muslims and scholars, they would have to think very carefully. You know, if you're going to have this committee that does Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi Munkar, what's their powers? How far should they be allowed to go? Should they be allowed to go into people's houses, spying in hotels and things like that? Or is that going too far? I mean, the straightforward hukam that we have is that they should not be allowed to spy into people's houses. But I imagine there may be an argument today that things have become so bad, you know, that we need to take extreme measures maybe sometimes or things like that. So it's for each place is different. The people, the ulama of a certain place know their own social conditions. They know their own society better. They know what should be appropriate or not appropriate. You know? What I've come across, what I know in the Middle East they do have these type of things, don't they? But whether they actually, I don't know if they go that far to actually check hotels, names of people who are staying in the hotels. It seems a bit too far to me personally. But just after, yes, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Everywhere, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Surveillance society, some people call it. You know? And London is the leading place in the world. So practically anywhere in London you'll be filmed somehow. Oh yeah, much worse. Now they've got such integrated computer systems to do the surveillance as well, you know? Big brothers as well. Yep, definitely. So that's what I mean, you know, these are general, obviously, hukums, but there may circumstances where obviously anything can be overridden if there's other more stronger indications. But it just does sound a bit excessive to me. I don't know. I don't really want to say. I don't want to get into a sidetrack about just us society. Just stick to the point here about the ghiba. لا يغتب بعضكم بعضا. Do not backbite one another. According to the Prophet ﷺ, when he defined ghiba, he said to speak of your brother something that he would dislike. To speak concerning your brother something that he would dislike. And according to some of the other hadiths that ghiba, you know, the Prophet ﷺ told of Aisha for very, very minor, what we would consider minor, when someone came to visit them, another woman, and when she left, said that Aisha was telling the Prophet ﷺ who it was by saying the short one. And she was making an indication saying the short one, you know, she's very short in other words. And the Prophet ﷺ reprimanded her for that, just to describe someone as a short. Because that's something that most people don't really be too happy. So to mention your brother in a way that he would not be pleased with. Most people don't like to be called the short one or the fat one or the big nose one So that under the prophetic definition would come under riba. Something that we might think is nothing would be something very minor. You know? So it's quite serious. لا يغتب بعضكم بعضا. And then from the word riba is from ghaiba, so that's why most people assume it means if it's done behind someone's back. But actually, according to most of the scholars, they say even if it was said in front of the person, it was still considered riba. Uh, the reason why we normally think it's behind someone's back is because normally in front of someone you wouldn't tend to say those things. But if you say in front of them, that's even worse in a way. Than saying it behind their back. So whether it's in front of them or behind them, we shouldn't really be putting people, saying things they don't really want to hear about themselves or putting them down. Yeah? And ultimately all of this stems from that root disease which is kibr. It's always kibr. Because whenever we put people down or backbite them or make fun of them, it's always in a way it's boosting our own ego deep down inside. So that's the definition of ego and kibr, the arrogance is to look down on others. Look down on others. And then obviously this very powerful phrase here, أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَنْ يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of his dead brother? Now the point here that Imam al-Razi rahimahullah made, that eating the, why is it given the metaphor of eating the flesh of your brother? Because you're putting down his honor, his irb. Someone mentioned earlier irb. All of these actually, this and the previous things, all relate back to irb, which is someone's honor, someone's dignity. These were things in the past that were very, very important to people and are being lost in our current satanic society. So this is what Shaitan wanted from the beginning, to get rid of people, human beings, the honor and the dignity that has been given to the human being by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the thing he wanted to always get rid of, and now we're living in a culture, this materialistic culture, which is all got rid of all of that. So words like honor, dignity don't mean much to us anymore. But in the past they meant everything. You've heard the phrase, it doesn't matter if you're Muslim or non-Muslim, this is something that was across the world, all societies traditionally. You heard the term, I'll give you my word of honor. If someone in this country, a non-Muslim, gave you their word of honor, they would rather die than break that word. That's how important honor was to people. It was more important than even being killed. You die rather than lose your honor. You see what I mean? So we have to what they call in sociology, sociological imagination. We have to be real, because we're growing up in a very different type of state of affairs. And what I think we can definitely call a satanic world order or satanic culture, because it's dominated by that satanic influences. Sometimes we have to really try to think how things were in the past, a few generations ago. How human beings lived for many, many thousands of years. It's so different. These things were so. This is why Abu Sufyan, he wouldn't, when he was in front of Heraclius, in front of the emperor of Rome, and Heraclius wanted to ask about the Prophet, because he'd received the letter. He called the Arabs that were in, he said to his people, call any Arabs that from that part of town. So they found Abu Sufyan and a group of Quraysh that were in Sham at that time, on their tijara. And they brought them in front of Heraclius. Heraclius said to him, who's your leader? And they sent Abu Sufyan forward. And he said to him, stand in front of them. Because Abu Sufyan at that time was one of the biggest enemies of the Prophet ﷺ. But he knew, Heraclius knew, and everyone knew that he will not lie in front of the rest of the people behind him, the Quraysh, because it would be so disgrace to his honor. That this is a noble person. No, he's not a Muslim, he's from the idolaters of Quraysh, but he's from a noble family. To actually then, word would have got around in Arabia that Abu Sufyan in front of the Emperor Heraclius, he lied. It would have just been too horrible for him to know, to have that. So that's why Heraclius put him in front. He said, because he knew he would not lie in front of his own people. Because of the shame, the absolute disgrace of it. So then Abu Sufyan had to tell the truth about the Prophet to Heraclius. And Abu Sufyan actually said that, if I was not in front of my people, I would have not told him all those things about him. This was honor. The whole thing is about honor, irb. That's one of the 6 things that the Sharia has to protect. The whole of Sharia is about those 6 things. One of them is irb, the honor of people. When you backbite people, Imam al-Ghazali said it's like, you're eating in their honor. And the honor of someone is more beloved to him than his own laham, his own flesh and blood. You see what I mean? So that's why it's like eating the flesh of the dead brother. So it's like eating his flesh. His honor is more dearer and closer to him than his own flesh and blood. Deen, starts with deen, then life, and then you have property, lineage, honor, aql, that's it, intellect. Lineage, meaning that's why zina is haram. So people need to know their lineages, their father, who their father is, who their mother is. That's why adultery, these things. Genocide will come under life, which is higher than that. And aql is why things like khamar, alcohol, things like that are haram. To protect the mind itself. These are, this is why backbiting is like eating the flesh. And also those previous things, when you, in other words, so the whole thing here from these 2 ayahs, what we get, and linking into the next ayah where it says, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. And also the first part as well, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us in tribes. We have made into tribes and groups. You could say nations, but in those days, nation thing is a new thing, but tribes and community, you could say ummah, civilizations, instead of something like that. لِتَعَارَفُوا Lama ta'leel, the reason, this is the reason, or you could say a reason, it doesn't have to be the only reason, it's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the wisdoms why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us into different tribes and nations, so that we could get to know one another. It's part of the beauty and the wisdom of His decree, His plan. When you meet people of different cultures, different societies, different to us, it's part of getting to know one another. You can marry people from different cultures. There's a beauty in it. In other words, not so that we can put each other down, make fun of one another, destroy one another's honor. That's not the reason. This is the reason. You know what I mean? Because often people tend to put down people of different tribes. He's not Kashmiri or something. He's from Karachi, or he's from Lahore, or whatever. So it works at every level. This is unfortunately, this is a human condition. Yeah? It works at every level. If it's not, he's not Pakistani, that's Bangladeshi. But then within Pakistan, he's from Karachi, he's from Kashmir or whatever. The Arabs and the Persians, they used to have that as well. The Persians used to say, those Arabs, who look at them dying of thirst in the desert, while the dogs of Isfahan are drinking cool water. So all people naturally, they have this type of horrible. That's not the reason. That's not the wisdom, the hikmah, the beauty of why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created these things. Inshallah, maybe we'll finish off there. Any questions on today's And then you see the next ayah which actually gives us indication about the Islam and Iman. The whole idea of going from Islam to Iman. And then here you see then, look at the definition of mu'min. Innamal mu'minun. Who are the mu'minun? Who are the true believers now? So it goes on, from Islam to Iman. Those who believe in Allah and His Messenger, then they don't have any further doubts. Once they believe, they've got their full belief. وَجَاهَدُوا بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. This is always the peak of Iman. This is the peak that you'll always come back to in the Quran. Is then they start striving and struggling for the sake of Allah, the path of Allah, for the deen of Allah, to establish the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every time and place, with their wealth and their lives. That is then the ultimate high level of Iman. Do you wish to teach Allah the deen, or do you want Allah to teach you? You know what I mean? And then this is going back to those Arabs who had come and said that we become Muslim and all this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives tawfiq to have a deep understanding of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to purify our hearts and bring us closer to Him and fill our hearts with love of Him and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and struggling and striving in His path, and to die upon Iman and Yaqeen. جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو أهله. جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو أهله. جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو أهله. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على